He divorced her because he believed she was nothing, no ambition, no power, no future worth keeping. Years later, under crystal chandeliers at a luxury gala packed with billionaires, fate placed her right in front of him again. And instead of shame, he chose cruelty. He laughed, stepped closer, and spat at her feet, right there in front of the elite. He wanted to remind her she didn't belong in his world, that she was still small, still invisible. But what he didn't know was devastatingly simple. His job, his paycheck, his entire future were already resting in her quiet hands. And that night, without shouting or revenge, the woman he once called useless would end his life. With silence. Caleb Harrington believed success was supposed to be loud. It roared through the engine of his luxury car, echoed in the penthouse where glass walls overlooked the city, and lived in the sharp confidence of his voice whenever he spoke. Power, to Caleb, wasn't something you carried quietly, it was something you displayed. At work, his name alone made people straighten their posture. Junior executives lowered their voices when he walked by. Assistants scrambled to please him. He was rising fast inside one of the most powerful tech companies in the country, and he never missed a chance to remind others of that fact. Titles mattered to him. Business cards mattered. Invitations to elite events mattered. Character? That was for people who had nothing else. At networking dinners and black-tie galas, Caleb spoke as if the room existed to hear him. He told stories of sleepless nights, ruthless decisions, and sacrifices only strong men could make. People nodded, impressed by his confidence, unaware of how carefully rehearsed every word was. He loved to say, "I built everything I have with my own hands." And the truth was, he believed it. What he didn't talk about was the woman who once believed in him when no one else did. The quiet partner who never asked for credit. The wife he left behind the moment his world began to shine brighter than her silence. To Caleb, she had been part of a past he no longer needed. A reminder of a time when he had nothing, when success wasn't guaranteed. Leaving her felt like proof that he had evolved, that he had outgrown weakness. And now, standing on the solid ground of power and privilege, Caleb never once questioned where that ground came from. He never asked who truly owned the company whose name was stitched into his tailored suits. He never wondered whose decisions shaped the future he was so proud to control. Because in Caleb Harrington's world, success had one rule. If it looked like power, it was power. And the quiet truths beneath his feet, he never noticed them. Until they were ready to collapse. Years earlier, before the penthouse and the tailored suits, Caleb Harrington had been married to Elena. She was never the kind of woman people noticed when she entered a room. She didn't compete for attention or decorate her words with ambition. Her clothes were simple, her smile was gentle, and her presence carried a calm that made noisy people uncomfortable. Caleb used to mistake that calm for emptiness. Elena wasn't impressed by titles or luxury. When Caleb talked about promotions, she listened, but she never applauded. When he bragged about being different from other men, she nodded quietly instead of feeding his ego. To her, patience was a form of strength. Stability mattered more than applause. To Caleb, silence looked like failure. He wanted a partner who made him look powerful. A wife who sparkled at dinners, who impressed investors, who reflected his growing importance. Elena didn't play that role. She didn't interrupt conversations to boast about her husband. She didn't dress to dominate a room. And worst of all, she never chased his approval. At first, he tried to change her. He bought her expensive dresses she never asked for, introduced her with rehearsed compliments, corrected her in public when she spoke too simply. Every time she refused to perform, resentment quietly replaced affection. "You're holding me back," he once told her, his voice sharp with frustration. Elena didn't argue. She just looked at him, the way someone looks at a storm they know will pass, and asked softly, "Is that what you really believe?" Caleb took her question as weakness. As his career accelerated, his patience for Elena faded. Late nights at work turned into missed dinners. Conversations turned into monologues. Eventually, he stopped pretending there was space for her in the life he was building. The divorce came quickly, No shouting. No lawyers battling over assets. No public drama. Elena didn't cry in court. She didn't demand alimony. She didn't beg him to reconsider. She signed the papers calmly, as if she had been preparing for this moment long before Caleb ever spoke the words. To him, that was proof she never cared. He told friends she was too simple, too passive, not made for the world I'm in now. People nodded sympathetically, impressed by how decisively he had cut ties with a woman who didn't fit his future. Elena walked away with nothing but a small apartment, a quiet routine, and time. Time to think. Time to observe. Time to let Caleb believe the story he wanted to tell. What Caleb never understood was that Elena had never needed to rush. She had grown up watching powerful people move quietly. She understood that real influence didn't announce itself. It waited. It invested. It positioned itself where emotions couldn't reach it. While Caleb chased visibility, Elena chose invisibility. She placed her trust not in people, but in systems. Not in applause, but in leverage. She listened more than she spoke, learned more than she revealed, and made decisions without seeking validation. Caleb thought he had won because he walked away louder. But Elena had walked away smarter. She had something far more valuable than his pride, control over her time, her choices, and the future Caleb was too distracted to question. And one day, when the noise around him grew, so loud he couldn't hear the truth beneath his feet, that quiet control would place her exactly where she needed to be, standing above him, without ever raising her voice. The night of the pre-IPO gala was everything Caleb Harrington believed he deserved. The venue glittered with excess, crystal chandeliers, marble floors polished to perfection, servers gliding silently with champagne that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The city's most powerful investors, board members, and media elites filled the room, their laughter sharp and self-assured. This was Caleb's world now. He adjusted his cufflinks as cameras flashed nearby. His name appeared on screens beside words like visionary, executive leader, future of tech. Colleagues clapped him on the back. Executives leaned in when he spoke. Every glance, every nod, fed the belief that he was untouchable. Tonight wasn't just a celebration, it was confirmation. The company was going public, fortunes would multiply overnight, and Caleb was positioned perfectly at the center of it all. As he accepted another drink, his confidence deepened into arrogance. Alcohol loosened the edges of his restraint, sharpening the cruelty beneath his charm. That's when he saw her. At first, his eyes passed over her without recognition. She stood near the edge of the room, dressed simply, holding a glass of water instead of champagne. She wasn't surrounded by admirers. No one rushed to greet her. She didn't wear the loud confidence the night demanded. Then she turned slightly, and the past hit him like a sudden chill. Elena. For a moment, Caleb stood frozen, disbelief tightening his jaw. What was she doing here? This wasn't a place for people like her. This wasn't a room for quiet women with no ambition. A laugh escaped his mouth, short, incredulous. She really thought she belonged here? Old resentment surged back, mixed with the intoxication of power. Seeing her there felt like an insult, like a reminder he hadn't asked for, and the ego that had been applauded all evening demanded release. Caleb straightened his shoulders and walked toward her. The closer he got, the more eyes followed him. People recognized him. They expected a performance. And Caleb never disappointed an audience. Elena, he said loudly, his voice slicing through the polite hum of conversation. She looked up slowly. There was no shock on her face, no fear, just recognition. Caleb, she replied calmly. That calm irritated him more than anger ever could. He smirked, glancing around as if sharing a private joke with the room. I didn't know they were letting anyone in tonight. A few people laughed nervously. Elena said nothing. Caleb leaned closer, his breath heavy with alcohol. Do you even know what kind of event this is? He continued. This is a pre-IPO gala. Billionaires. Decision-makers. Not spectators. Still, she didn't react. Something dark flickered behind his eyes. He wanted a response. Tears. Embarrassment. proof that he still had power over her. "So, tell me," he said, raising his voice just enough for nearby guests to hear, "who did you come with? Or did you just wander in, hoping to feel important for one night?" The room began to quiet. Conversations slowed. People sensed something was wrong, but no one intervened. Elena looked at him steadily. "I was invited," she said softly. That was the moment Caleb lost control. A sharp laugh burst from his chest. "Invited," he scoffed. "You." Before she could say another word, before anyone could stop him, Caleb stepped forward and spat at her feet. The sound was small, but the impact was enormous. Gasps rippled through the room. Glasses froze mid-air. Music seemed to disappear. Every eye turned toward them. Silence. Utter, unforgiving silence. Caleb straightened, his expression twisted with satisfaction and cruelty. "That," he said coldly, "is where you belong. Don't ever confuse my world for yours again." For a heartbeat, the room waited. Everyone expected something. Tears, a scream, security rushing in. Some even expected Elena to collapse under the weight of public humiliation. But she didn't. Elena slowly looked down at her shoes. She reached into her purse, removed a small handkerchief, and carefully wiped the spot where his spit had landed. Her movements were unhurried, precise, almost ceremonial. Then she folded the cloth and placed it back into her purse. She lifted her head. Her face was calm. No anger, no shame, no trembling lips, just patience. People shifted uncomfortably. Whispers began to spread. Some looked at Caleb with unease. Others avoided his gaze entirely. Elena met his eyes one last time, not with defiance, but with something far more unsettling. Understanding. She didn't say a word. She simply turned slightly toward the stage and waited. Caleb scoffed, rolling his eyes, convinced he had won. The humiliation was complete. The audience had witnessed her place. What he didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that this gala wasn't the stage for his triumph. It was the countdown to his collapse. Because in that silent moment, as Elena stood composed amid the chaos he created, the truth was already moving behind the scenes. The microphones were warming up. The board members were taking their seats. And the company Caleb believed he controlled was about to reveal who truly owned it. And for the first time in his life, Caleb Harrington would learn that silence, when backed by power, is the loudest force in the room. The silence after the incident felt heavier than any music ever played in that hall. People tried to return to their conversations, but the energy had changed. Laughter sounded forced. Smiles didn't reach eyes. Caleb stood among them, chest rising with shallow confidence, telling himself it didn't matter. He had put her in her place. The room had seen it. Still, something felt off. Elena remained where she was, quiet, composed, almost invisible again. She wasn't hiding. She simply didn't demand attention. And somehow, that unsettled people more than tears ever could. A soft chime echoed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, stepping onto the stage, voice smooth and rehearsed. "If I may have your attention." The room slowly turned forward. Caleb lifted his glass, already half bored. He had heard enough speeches to know how this went. Compliments, projections, applause, more champagne. "This evening marks a historic milestone," the host continued. "As we approach our IPO, it is only fitting that we recognize the individual whose belief in this company made tonight possible." Caleb smiled faintly. "The largest shareholder," the host said, pausing for effect, "will now address us." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Largest shareholder. Caleb straightened slightly. He knew the names: Old Capital, Silent Partners, Faceless Funds. Powerful people who rarely showed their faces. This was likely a formality. Their ownership, the host added, represents not just confidence, but control. Control. Something tightened in Caleb's chest. "And tonight," the host said, voice lowering, "for the first time, she has agreed to speak publicly." The word she landed like a dropped glass. Caleb's smile faltered. A woman? He glanced instinctively toward the stage, then, without meaning to, his eyes shifted across the room. They found Elena. She was already moving, not rushing, not hesitating, walking. A wave of confusion spread as heads turned, following her quiet steps through the sea of luxury. Whispers broke out, sharp and urgent. Is that? No, it can't be. Who is she? Caleb's heart began to pound. No, 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 no. Elena reached the steps of the stage. The host stepped aside respectfully, offering her the microphone with a small nod, not as courtesy, but recognition. The screens behind her lit up. Graphs, numbers, percentages. Then one figure appeared, bold and unmistakable. 47% ownership. A collective gasp tore through the hall. Nearly half the company. Not influence. Not leverage. Control. Caleb's glass slipped from his fingers and shattered against the marble floor. No one noticed. His vision tunneled as the reality slammed into him, brutal and undeniable. The company he had given his soul to, the future he bragged about, the power he thought he commanded, it was hers. Always had been. Elena stood at the podium, hands resting lightly on its surface. The room was silent now, not with discomfort but awe. She looked different up there. Not louder, not grander, just undeniable. I prefer not to be seen, she began, her voice calm, steady, carrying effortlessly through the hall. Not because I lack confidence, but because visibility is rarely necessary when you understand timing. People lean forward. I invested early, she continued, when belief mattered more than applause, when risk wasn't fashionable, when silence was safer than recognition. Caleb felt dizzy. Memories crashed into him. Late nights she spent reading financial reports. The quiet questions she used to ask, the patience he mocked, the silence he mistook for weakness. Elena glanced down briefly, then lifted her eyes, meeting his across the room. Not accusing, not triumphant, final. For years, she said, I watched this company grow. I watched leadership rise, and I watched character reveal itself. A subtle pause. Tonight, she went on, was meant to celebrate success. But success without humility is fragile. Power without restraint is temporary. Security guards began to move, not toward her, but toward Caleb. He didn't even resist. He couldn't. His legs felt hollow as hands gently took his arms. Not rough, not angry, professional, final. As they guided him toward the exit, the room parted without a word. People who once feared him wouldn't meet his eyes. Investors turned away. Colleagues stared at the floor. Elena continued speaking. Ownership, she said, is responsibility, and responsibility demands integrity. Caleb's world collapsed with every step. At the doors, he turned back one last time. She hadn't looked at him again. She didn't need to. Elena Harrington, the host announced softly, voice trembling with respect. She nodded once. My name, she said, was never important. Then she delivered the words that would echo far beyond that room. Power, Elena said, her voice calm but absolute, does not need to shout. The doors closed behind Caleb with a quiet click. No applause followed immediately, just silence. Then, slowly people stood, not cheering, acknowledging. Elena stepped away from the podium and disappeared back into the crowd, the same way she had lived her life, quietly, intentionally, in control. And in that glittering hall of billionaires and broken egos, one truth settled deep into every soul present. The loudest people rarely hold the most power, and the quiet ones are the ones who decide when everything ends. Outside the gala hall, the night air felt colder than Caleb Harrington remembered. The doors closed behind him, sealing off the world he had believed was his forever. The laughter, the power, the future he spoke about with such certainty, all of it vanished in seconds. His phone vibrated endlessly in his hand, notifications stacking like falling dominoes. Board emails, emergency meetings canceled, security access revoked. By morning, it would be official. The company had issued a statement. His role was under review, then quietly eliminated. Investors distanced themselves. Colleagues who once praised him stopped answering calls. His name, once spoken with admiration, now carried the weight of disgrace. Caleb didn't lose everything at once. He lost it layer by layer, status, influence, credibility, until nothing was left but the man he had tried so desperately to escape. Inside the hall, Elena gained nothing new. She didn't smile with victory. She didn't accept congratulations. She didn't linger where admiration waited, because she already had what Caleb chased his entire life: control, peace, and self-respect. She hadn't destroyed him with revenge. She had simply removed the illusion he built his life upon. Days later, Caleb found her. Not at a gala, not in a boardroom, at a quiet cafe, tucked away from noise and recognition. He looked smaller somehow, tired, stripped of the confidence that once filled rooms. His voice cracked when he spoke her name. "Elena, I made a mistake." She looked up calmly, the same patience in her eyes that had always unsettled him. "I need help," he said, lowering his head. "Just a chance. I know I don't deserve it." Elena listened without interrupting. She didn't remind him of the spit on her shoes. She didn't recount the humiliation. She didn't ask for apologies. When he finished, she spoke gently. "I won't save you," she said, "because you don't need saving. You need to understand." Caleb swallowed hard. She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady. "Power didn't change you. It revealed you. And losing it is not punishment, it's clarity." She stood, leaving enough money on the table to cover the coffee. "That's my gift to you," she added quietly. "Closure." Caleb looked up, desperate to say something, anything, but Elena was already walking away. No final glance, no victory speech, no bitterness, just quiet certainty. As she disappeared into the crowd, Elena felt something Caleb never would: peace. Because true power isn't about rising above others. It's about rising above the need to prove anything at all. And for the first time in her life, she walked forward unburdened, free, whole, and finally unseen. By choice. Some people believe strength must be loud, announced, displayed, proven to the world. Others learn, far too late, that real power moves in silence. Elena didn't win because she revealed her wealth. She won because she never needed to, because she understood that patience isn't weakness, and calm isn't absence, it's control. While pride shouted, she waited. While arrogance performed, she positioned herself. And when the moment arrived, she didn't raise her voice. She ended the illusion. If this story moved you, ask yourself, have you ever mistaken kindness for weakness? Or silence for nothing at all? Backhand index pointing right, like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories where patience becomes power. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room owns everything.